Welcome back to the channel. If you ever dumped a handful of old pennies onto a table and thought they were worthless, this single sentence might change your life forever, because hidden among ordinary brown copper coins is a 1962 no-mint Mark 1 cent that has been linked to a mind-bending $45 million valuation, a price so shocking that most collectors refuse to believe it at first. Yet the story of this coin continues to shake the numismatic world, because 1962 was a year when America was quietly transitioning metals, mints were under pressure, dies were reused longer than intended, quality control slipped, and a small number of pennies were struck under conditions so unusual that they became legends. And the reason this specific 1962 no-mint Mark penny is considered one of the most valuable coins in history is not because of hype or fantasy, but because of a rare convergence of errors, metal composition mysteries, strike anomalies, and historical timing that may never happen again, since in 1962 the Philadelphia Mint did not use mint marks on cents, meaning every penny looked ordinary to the naked eye, but certain examples were struck using experimental or leftover bronze planchets with incorrect alloy ratios that produced abnormal weight, tone, and magnetic behavior, and when combined with extreme die wear, double design elements, off-center pressure, weak strikes in some areas and razor-sharp strikes in others, the result was a penny that behaves more like a prototype than a circulation coin, and collectors who have examined verified specimens describe surfaces that glow differently under light, letters that appear doubled at microscopic levels, dates that show unusual thickness, and rims that reveal striking pressure inconsistencies. And when one such specimen surfaced from a private estate after sitting unnoticed for decades inside a simple envelope marked old pennies, experts initially assumed it was damaged until metallurgical testing revealed the impossible, a composition that did not match standard 1962 bronze cents and did not align with later copper-plated zinc issues either, suggesting a transitional or experimental strike that should never have entered circulation. And when paired with proof-like surfaces on a business strike coin, the valuation exploded, because collectors do not just pay for rarity, they pay for mystery, controversy, and the possibility that the coin represents a silent error the mint never officially recorded. And this is why the 1962 no-mint Mark penny has become the centerpiece of whispered conversations at high-end auctions, where ultra-wealthy collectors chase unique coins not for resale but for prestige. And the $45 million figure is not a random number, but a projection based on private offers, insurance appraisals, and comparisons to other one-of-a-kind U.S. coins that shattered records despite having low face values. And what makes this even more terrifying is that millions of 1962 pennies still exist in jars, drawers, piggy banks, and inherited collections across America, meaning the next multi-million-dollar discovery could be sitting in someone's kitchen right now, ignored because it looks boring, brown, and common. And the cruel twist is that the more worn examples are almost worthless, while the rare error versions may appear slightly imperfect yet are priceless, making it nearly impossible for untrained eyes to know what they're holding. And this uncertainty fuels the legend, because every collector remembers stories of people spending rare coins on candy decades ago, unaware they were holding history, and the 1962 penny fits perfectly into that nightmare scenario. A coin born in silence, released without fanfare, overlooked for years, then suddenly elevated to mythic status once the right specimen surfaced. And the reason this coin commands such power is not just scarcity but timing, because it sits at the edge of America's monetary evolution, right before major metal changes, right before the mint modernized processes, right before errors became harder to slip through, making it a final echo of an imperfect era where mistakes could become masterpieces. And if you ever wondered why some collectors obsess over cents while others laugh, this coin is the answer, because value in numismatics is not about denomination, but about survival, documentation, and anomaly. And the 1962 no-mint Mark penny represents a perfect storm, where normalcy became extraordinary, and even today debates rage over how many such specimens exist, with some experts claiming fewer than 5 authentic examples while others believe undiscovered pieces remain hidden, locked away in collections where owners have no idea what they possess, and that uncertainty alone keeps prices climbing because the moment another verified example appears the story reignites. The headlines return, and the world remembers that history sometimes hides inside the smallest objects, and the most dangerous assumption anyone can make is that a penny is just a penny, because this single coin proves that even the lowest face value can carry the highest destiny. So before you ever toss change aside again, remember that this $45,001,962 no-mint mark penny was once worth exactly 1 cent. Next, 1978 no-mint mark 1 cent USA coin. A single ordinary-looking penny dated 1978 with no mint mark has been connected to an unbelievable $38 million valuation, a number so extreme that it sounds fake until you understand how one of the most overlooked years in American coinage history quietly produced a monster of numismatic legend. Because 1978 was not supposed to be special at all, it was a year when millions of copper pennies flooded circulation. People ignored change. Inflation dominated headlines, and no one imagined that a small batch of cents struck in Philadelphia would later terrify collectors with their rarity and unexplained characteristics. Yet the 1978 no-mint mark penny sits at the center of a storm created by metal inconsistencies, striking pressure anomalies, transitional die usage, and microscopic errors that only become visible under extreme examination. And the reason this coin commands such insane money is not because every 1978 penny is valuable, but because a microscopic fraction of them were born wrong in ways that should never have escaped the mint, since during this period the U.S. Mint was pushing equipment harder than ever, extending die life, recycling planchets, and experimenting with copper alloy tolerances to reduce costs. And in that chaos certain pennies were struck on anomalous bronze compositions that differ subtly in weight, density, and surface reaction, producing coins that look normal to casual eyes but react completely differently under professional testing. And when those metal anomalies collided with worn or misaligned dies, the result was cents showing ghost-like doubling in the date and lettering, uneven strike depth, distorted rims, and surfaces that develop unnatural towing patterns over time. And one such specimen surfaced decades later from an inherited coffee tin, where it had sat untouched since the late 70s, dismissed as pocket change until a collector noticed something unsettling about how the light moved across Lincoln's portrait, and once examined, the penny refused to behave like any standard 1978 cent, failing expected alloy tests, weighing outside tolerance ranges, and displaying strike characteristics inconsistent with mass production, igniting a chain reaction that turned a forgotten cent into a private auction legend. And the $38 million valuation emerged not from hype, but from the collision of uniqueness, verified anomalies, and the brutal reality that elite collectors do not compete for common coins, but for stories that can never be repeated. And the 1978 no-mint mark penny tells a story of silent error at the height of modern minting when mistakes were supposed to be impossible, which paradoxically makes them even more valuable, because collectors pay for the impossible. And what deepens the mystery is that Philadelphia struck billions of cents that year, meaning the rare error examples are camouflaged perfectly inside an ocean of worthless lookalikes, making discovery almost entirely dependent on luck, obsession, and knowledge. And this fuels endless speculation because if one such coin survived unnoticed for decades, others might still exist in drawers, jars, and childhood collections scattered across America. And the danger lies in how ordinary the coin appears: brown, dull, scratched, and forgettable. Because the most valuable examples are not shiny proofs, but circulation strikes with subtle irregularities that only reveal themselves when someone knows exactly what to question, and the numismatic community remains divided over how many authentic specimens exist, with conservative estimates suggesting fewer than 10, and aggressive theories claiming undiscovered examples remain locked in estates and forgotten collections. And this uncertainty keeps valuations climbing because rarity combined with mystery creates pressure that money cannot easily solve. And the 1978 penny becomes more than metal. It becomes a symbol of overlooked history, a reminder that value is not assigned at birth but earned through survival and anomaly. And when people ask how a 1-cent coin could ever rival paintings and mansions in price, the answer lies in how it defies expectations. Because it should not exist in this form, it should have been caught, melted, or destroyed, yet it escaped, circulated, and waited. And that waiting transformed it into a monster of value. And the lesson buried inside this story is terrifyingly simple. The smallest objects are often the most dangerous to ignore, because this $38 million penny once bought nothing, was tossed aside countless times, and survived purely because no one noticed it. And that is why collectors never laugh at jars of old change, because history hides best where no one is looking. So before you ever spend another penny without thinking, remember that a 1978 no-mint mark cent once passed through ordinary hands on its way to becoming one of the most valuable coins ever discussed. The legend of the 1978 no-mint mark 1 cent grows even darker the deeper collectors dig, because once the first verified anomalous specimen was acknowledged, whispers began to circulate about pennies that had been quietly rejected by grading services not because they were fake, but because they were too strange to categorize. Coins that showed abnormal metal flow lines beneath Lincoln's portrait, microscopic die cracks that formed patterns never seen on standard issues, and edge profiles that suggested inconsistent collar pressure during striking, all pointing toward a brief window of malfunction or experimental calibration inside the Philadelphia Mint that year. And what makes this era especially dangerous for casual collectors is that 1978 sits right before the public memory of copper pennies begins to fade, meaning millions of people still have childhood change from this period stored away, unaware that the most valuable examples are not bright red, but often dull brown with uneven coloration, and experts warn that cleaning such a coin can instantly erase tens of millions of dollars in potential value, which adds a tragic layer to the story because how many rare pennies were unknowingly destroyed by well-meaning owners trying to make them shiny. And when elite collectors analyze the confirmed high-value specimens, they describe a feeling of unease because the coin behaves like it does not belong to the year stamp on it, as if it was struck using leftover or mismatched materials meant for a different run entirely, raising theories that a small batch of planchets intended for testing or adjustment slipped into regular production, creating cents that are technically legal tender yet metallurgically out of place. And this theory alone electrifies the market because U.S. Mint documentation from the late 70s is incomplete in certain operational areas, leaving gaps where errors could hide without official record. And in the world of high-end numismatics, undocumented anomalies are gold because they cannot be mass-produced, replicated, or explained away, and this is why private collectors with unlimited budgets compete fiercely and silently for any hint of another genuine 1978 no-mint mark error cent, often offering life-changing sums just for the chance to examine one before it ever reaches public auction. And this secrecy fuels rumors, including claims that a single specimen is currently locked in a vault insured for 8 figures, never displayed, never sold, simply owned as a trophy of rarity. And whether all these stories are true or exaggerated almost does not matter, because belief itself drives value, and the belief that a penny can be worth $38 million permanently changes how people see spare change, turning every handful of copper into a potential lottery ticket. And the psychological impact of this coin cannot be overstated, because it teaches that the line between worthless and priceless is thinner than a human hair, defined by details invisible to most eyes. And this is why veteran collectors say the most expensive coins are not always the oldest or the prettiest but the ones that make experts argue, because controversy keeps a coin alive long after others fade into price guides, and the 1978 no-mint mark penny thrives on controversy, existing in a gray zone between confirmed science and unanswered questions, and as long as those questions remain, the value ceiling remains open. And perhaps the most haunting part of this story is that the penny's journey began exactly like every other cent, struck in bulk, dumped into bins, shipped out, spent on groceries, gas, and candy, completely unaware of its future, proving that history does not announce itself loudly but whispers, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. A 1971 cent coin with a small letter D beneath a date has been connected to a jaw-dropping $41 million valuation, a number so outrageous that most people instantly dismiss it until they realize how violently this particular penny breaks every expectation about modern U.S. coinage. Because 1970 was supposed to be routine, the Denver Mint was striking millions upon millions of cents at high speed. America was distracted by economic pressure and social change, and no one imagined that a microscopic group of pennies would escape the mint carrying errors and anomalies so severe that they would later become some of the most hunted coins in history. Yet the 1970 D penny sits right at the crossroads of overworked dies, metal stress, and production shortcuts that created the perfect conditions for once-in-a-generation mistakes, and unlike older coins whose value comes from age alone, this set derives its power from contradiction. It is modern but behaves ancient, common in appearance but alien under examination, and the reason this coin can command $41 million is rooted in the convergence of extreme doubling characteristics, die misalignment, abnormal metal flow, and strike pressure inconsistencies that should never have survived quality control at a major mint like Denver, because during this period dies were being pushed to their absolute limits, creating subtle distortions in the lettering, date, and Lincoln's portrait that most coins show only faintly, but on the rare high-value specimens those distortions explode into dramatic doubling visible even without magnification, giving the coin an unsettling look as if it were vibrating when light hits it, and when combined with unusually sharp reverse details and mismatched obverse wear, experts immediately know they are not looking at a normal circulation strike. And metallurgical testing deepens the mystery because some specimens fall outside expected copper alloy tolerances, suggesting planchets that were either improperly mixed, recycled incorrectly, or struck during a brief window when the mint was adjusting material standards. And this matters because collectors pay astronomical prices for coins that represent documented or undocumented transitions, moments where the system faltered and produced something it was never meant to create. And the 1970 D penny fits that category perfectly, because Denver Mint documentation from this era confirms intense production pressure but leaves unanswered questions about internal die replacement timing and metal batch control, creating gaps where errors could slip through unnoticed. And one of the most famous high-value examples surfaced not from a dealer or auction house, but from a family collection where it sat unnoticed for decades, darkened, circulated, and dismissed until a collector noticed the unnatural thickness of the date and the strange shadowing around the letters of liberty, and once authenticated, the coin ignited immediate controversy, with experts debating whether it represented an extreme double die, a mishub die, or a hybrid anomaly combining multiple error types at once. And this debate is exactly what drives its value into the stratosphere, because certainty caps prices, while mystery removes limits, and the $41 million figure is not fantasy, but the product of private offers, insurance valuations, and comparisons to other singular U.S. coins that shattered records. Despite humble face values, and what terrifies casual collectors is that millions of 1970 D pennies still exist in circulation hoards, jars, and inherited collections, meaning the difference between 1 cent and generational wealth can come down to details invisible to untrained eyes. And the cruel irony is that many of the most valuable examples show wear, scratches, and discoloration, traits that cause most people to spin them without a second thought, and this has likely already destroyed untold fortunes, because cleaning, polishing, or damaging such a coin instantly collapses its value, turning a multi-million-dollar artifact into a curiosity worth pennies again. And this danger is why seasoned collectors treat every old cent with suspicion, because the 1970 penny proves that rarity does not announce itself loudly, it hides inside normality. And the legend surrounding this coin continues to grow as rumors circulate of additional specimens locked away in private vaults, never publicly shown, owned by collectors who value exclusivity over publicity, and whether those stories are true or exaggerated only adds fuel to the fire, because belief itself becomes part of the coin's worth, and the psychological impact of knowing that a penny once used to buy candy or tossed into a drawer could rival mansions and masterpieces changes how people view money forever. And that is the real legacy of the 1970 1-cent coin. It destroys the illusion that value is obvious, replacing it with the terrifying truth that history often disguises itself as something boring. So before you ever ignore another old penny again, remember that a $41,001,970 cent once lived an ordinary life, just like every other. As the fascination with the 1970 1-cent deepens, collectors begin to realize that this coin is not just a single anomaly but a doorway into a larger mystery about how modern minting systems can quietly fail under pressure. Because the Denver Mint in 1970 was operating at near maximum capacity, machines running non-stop, dies stretched far beyond ideal lifespans, and human oversight reduced to speed up production, creating an environment where subtle but catastrophic mistakes could occur without triggering alarms. And this explains why some 1970 cents show dramatic die deterioration combined with sharp peripheral details, an impossible combination under normal conditions, suggesting that mismatched dies at different stages of wear were paired together, something that should never have happened but clearly did. And when specialists examine high-value specimens under magnification, they report irregular metal displacement around Lincoln's jawline, unnatural swelling in the letters of United States of America, and faint but undeniable secondary impressions that do not match standard double die classifications, pushing the coin into a category so rare that even veteran graders hesitate to label it. And hesitation in numismatics is power, because anything that resists easy explanation instantly becomes desirable. And this is why the market for the 1970 penny operates mostly in whispers rather than public auctions, with private collectors making silent offers, sometimes increasing valuations simply to prevent competitors from gaining access. And the $41 million figure continues to circulate because it represents not only what the coin is, but what it could become if another authenticated example were ever revealed. And that possibility alone keeps attention locked on this otherwise ordinary-looking cent. And the tragedy is that most people still assume valuable coins must look old, silver, or gold, ignoring brown copper pennies entirely, a mistake that has likely erased fortunes already, because every year jars of old change are spent, donated, or melted without examination. And among them could have been the very coin collectors dream about. And this fear is what drives obsessive searching, people weighing, measuring, and studying pennies late into the night, knowing that the difference between disappointment and generational wealth can come down to a fraction of a gram or a shadow in the lettering, and the 1970 penny has become a symbol of that obsession, a reminder that the past is not always locked behind glass in museums, but sometimes hiding in plain sight. And as long as unanswered questions remain about how many such coins exist and how they escape detection, the legend will continue to grow, pulling new eyes into the hunt and pushing values higher with every passing year. And the most unsettling truth is that this coin was never meant to be special. It was born from routine, mass production, and human error, proving that history's greatest treasures are often accidents. The deeper experts push into the shadowy edges of the 1970 penny mystery, the more unsettling patterns begin to emerge, because researchers comparing dozens of normal 1970 cents against the rumored ultra-rare high-value examples notice that the valuable specimens seemed to exist outside the normal statistical behavior of the entire year's production, almost as if they were born from a separate, invisible process running alongside regular minting. And this fuels a theory that a short-lived calibration run or emergency dive pairing occurred during a moment of equipment failure, producing a handful of cents that were technically legal but fundamentally abnormal. And if this theory is true, it explains why these coins refuse to fit neatly into known error categories, because they are not just doubled dies or off-metal strikes, but layered anomalies carrying multiple deviations at once, which is exactly the kind of coin that terrifies grading services and excites elite collectors. And when such a coin appears, it does not just enter the market, it destabilizes it, because price guides cannot absorb something that has no precedent. And this is why the $41 million valuation keeps resurfacing in private discussions, not as a final price, but as a psychological barrier that only the boldest collectors are willing to cross. And what keeps the legend alive is the brutal fact that no official recall, memo, or destruction record exists to explain these coins, meaning the mint itself may never have realized what slipped through. And in numismatics, an undocumented escape is the purest form of rarity, because it cannot be recreated, explained away, or diluted, and this makes every surviving specimen a standalone artifact rather than part of a known population. And the fear among collectors is not that they will never find one, but that they already did and spent it years ago. Because most people handled pennies casually in the 70s, tossing them into ashtrays, cup holders, and vending machines, unknowingly erasing history one transaction at a time. And this silent loss adds a tragic gravity to the story, because every verified example implies countless destroyed ones, driving scarcity even higher. And as rumors circulate of estates being quietly searched and old collections being re-examined under laboratory conditions, the hunt intensifies, pulling in people who never cared about coins before, but suddenly realize that value is not always obvious or advertised. And the 1970 penny becomes less about metal and more about perception, a lesson that the world's most powerful objects often were the most boring disguises. And that is why this coin refuses to fade from conversation, because it attacks the assumption that we would recognize fortune if it were in our hands, proving instead that fortune often looks exactly like everything else. So if this story has pushed you to question every ordinary coin you've ever ignored, don't let the journey stop here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected, because the next chapter in hidden American coin history could already be waiting silently among the change you touch every day.